Hey there, greetings and welcome to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show. This is a show that is dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So we're back again, day 3, March the 3rd, for the Battle of the Bands, featuring 2 more bands. This is a hard rock battle for those of you who haven't been following up to this point. 2 bands presented to me by Ben, and I listen to both albums, and then I decide which one I think I like better, and that band moves on to the next round. So we have, again, 2 new bands to me. As we've been talking about this, it's not your more well-established hard rock bands. A lot of, I was going to say second tier, but these are probably third tier bands, you know. So anyways, we have Jeronimo, their self-titled album. It's not actually their debut album though. This is their 3rd album, but it came from 1971. The other album is Fuzzy Duck, which is also the self-titled album, also from 1971. 10 tracks on the Jeronimo album, 12 tracks on the Fuzzy Duck album. So this one was a bit of a landslide for me. I'm not going to give it away right yet, but yeah, it was a pretty easy one. It was probably the first one I've had where it wasn't really a question of who was going to win. It was just a question of how much I liked that album that was going to win. Okay, so we start with Jeronimo because they were the first band given to me. 10 tracks, as I said. Very kind of hard rock album. Definitely hard rock. It did say hard rock heavy metal when I read about them a bit, but I don't see much heavy metal here. I do want to say, unfortunately for Jeronimo, they also had to deal with not a very good quality sound from the internet that I picked up. I couldn't get much volume from it. However, I could extrapolate and depend on what I heard, right? So a pretty heavy album. Mostly guitar riffing and some soloing, with the odd keyboard part, and vocals were pretty solid. Sometimes it was dual vocals. I could hear 2 guys singing. Pretty solid overall album. My favorite track is probably End of Time. I think it was probably easily my favorite track on the album. The end of our time. Sorry. Some pretty heavy riffing here. It's a pretty strong song. I liked it a lot. I actually listened to it twice. I liked it so much. Very good track. They did have elements of acoustic guitar on some of their bits that they did, but their songs were pretty much in the same range throughout. There were some softer kind of acoustic, maybe a little bit poppy song, if you want to call it that. But pretty much just a hard rocking album. The band is of German origin as well, which is kind of different since they have that kind of American sound to them for sure. Some of the songs on it, Sunday Shade, nice riffing, stylish and storyish in their style. They kind of tell stories when they're doing their songs for the most part, but there is a lot of kind of that repetitive type of chorus music that you get from hard rock bands where they're just repeating the chorus over and over again. There's quite a bit of that as well. Guitar is pretty strong on this album. He's a decent guitar player. I don't think he's phenomenal. I don't think didn't do anything that was eye-catching or anything, or ear-catching if you prefer. But he was pretty solid. The drummer attempted a solo on Hagdalia Night, I think that's how it's pronounced. Pretty heavy riffing and a nice guitar solo on this. He did do a bit of a drum solo. I don't think his abilities were that bad. I think his drumming, I heard the double bass rolls in there. I heard the rolls, and he kept it up for a fair bit. I just didn't think it was very imaginative. It seemed to lack some imagination. It also had a very kind of dated sound to it. I mean, it's 50 years old, so it's bound to have that. Yeah, it wasn't a particularly outstanding kind of drum solo, but I didn't mind it. It wasn't bad. This band, if you're looking to kind of compare them to perhaps a different band, someone of notoriety, I might say they have a couple of elements in here throughout the song that kind of remind me of Deep Purple. I think it's the keyboard part, the organ of the keyboard. A couple of tracks have the organ on it, and I think that kind of brings that kind of Deep Purple sound to it. Yeah, there was a couple of tracks that were a little bit poppy and up-tempo, but for the most part it was just straight-ahead rock and roll. Not a lot of kind of lovey type songs that you get with a straight-ahead type of rock and roll. They were pretty varied in their writings, talking about different aspects of society and stuff like that. So pretty different. Not a bad band, definitely. The last two tracks not so strong. A couple tracks in the middle, a little bit on the weak side as well. But they had 5 or 6 tracks on this album. I think were pretty solid tracks. So the other band, Fuzzy Duck, self-titled album from the same year. This band is a little bit more progressive. In fact, quite a bit more progressive on some of their tracks. A lot of variation in their music. Surprisingly, a fair number of funky kind of up-tempo beats to their music as well. The vocalist at times was quite high, kind of reminiscent of Uriah Heep's Salisbury album. Like there's some of that kind of screeching vocal. Well, I wouldn't say it's screeching, more like screaming vocals. Yeah, that's that. When he was doing it, it just reminded me of that Uriah Heep sound. The band overall, I think they have a kind of a grand funk feel to their music, but at the same time, I hear that quirky kind of quirky lyrics and quirky sounds that you get from Blue Oyster Cult. So they have some elements of different bands in their music. Not as much so with Jeronimo, who's just a straightforward hard rock band. So Fuzzy Duck's got some pretty interesting tracks here. So you got Mrs. Proud, which is a kind of an upbeat, kind of with some keys in it, nice drum roll in it, very proggy song. One of my favorite tracks on the album. I had two or three songs that I think were 7s. I gave 7s. This is one of them. The overall sound to their music is very kind of upbeat. I think they're very upbeat. They do have some hard rock feel to their music, definitely. That's probably the main element. But there's enough prog on here that they're not just a hard rock band. Also, they like I said, there's quite a few tracks. Time Will Be Your Doctor. I'm just looking down here. See, Country Boy. The second last track, what was it? No Name Face. Kind of got some kind of funky upbeats to them, like it's like yeah, that kind of funky beat that you would get, reminiscent of Grand Funk, I think. Now they don't sound like Grand Funk a lot, but they do have a lot of that kind of funky sound to their music. The one song, More Than I Am, which was the other song on the album I liked a lot. Very psychedelic and upbeat, kind of, but also very heavy too at the same time. Yeah, just a real cool song. I liked it. Country Boy was pretty solid too. Another funky, upbeat, kind of methodical, heavy song as well. Then you get, they do play quite a bit of the Hammond organ. It's pretty a dominant instrument on this album. A lot more than any of these other bands he's done so far. There's a lot more organ on this album, which kind of gives it that proggy feeling to the album. I wouldn't say this is by any stretch a prog album, but it certainly has enough prog on it to make it, noticeable. A couple of fairly long tunes as well. Mrs. Prout was, I think, the longest. It was 6 or 7 minutes long. Pretty long for a hard rock band. Double Time Woman, another really cool song. There was one song here, I'm just looking for it, see if I wrote it down. I can't find it. There was one song that was a little shorter, it just had a little short bit to it that was kind of very mellow, and that may actually have been, it was on the Jeronimo album. Just a little quick, kind of poppy, kind of mellow song. Nothing, just a little bit of instrumentation, really short tune. Yeah, that was with the Jeronimo. Sorry, I've got them mixed up there. But overall, I would say the Fuzzy Duck has, the album cover is kind of decent too. If you haven't seen it, it's a duck in a dress with a purse and a fuzzy afro hairdo. kind of funny. Yeah, they got that little quirkiness to their music, I think. Apparently, this album was only sold about, or only had 500 vinyl releases made of it. But I remember seeing it one time too. Not the album, but the CD. I think the CD probably has more of them out there. Definitely an album I would like to have. I think there's enough really solid stuff on here. The production's pretty good for that time period on this, and the album, when I listened to it, was the volume was a lot higher, so I got a lot more out of it. And that's unfortunate for Jeronimo. They didn't really get that for their music. I had to extrapolate, which wasn't really to their advantage. But on the whole, I think the Fuzzy Duck album was just varied enough, with enough catchy melodies and hooks and some heavy beats and some heavy guitar, but with enough kind of differenceness to the music to make it a more interesting album. And I think it won fairly easily here over Jeronimo. So Jeronimo will go by the side, and Fuzzy Duck will move on to the next round. So yeah, a great, this was kind of an interesting one. I enjoyed this one a little bit more. I'm actually enjoying this quite a bit because I'm hearing stuff that I've never heard before. And generally speaking, with hard rock, I tend to get into it quicker than I do with any other genre of music, so it makes it more interesting for me. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Battle of the Bands, Day 3, March the 3rd, Battle number 3. This will come out in the morning, of course, so please like and subscribe. It'd be much appreciated. And we will see you in the morning with another Battle of the Bands. Take care.